Hello, Hope from the Hood listeners. This is Sandhya Jha, your regular host. And as you know, we're in the midst of our very first fundraising campaign for the Oakland Peace Center. You can find information about that campaign at oaklandpeacecenter.nationbuilder.com/donate. And this week I wanted to give a special shout out to a number of amazing peace supporters in our community. Sushil Jacob, Houston Robertson, Luann Hughes, Jennifer Lynn, Cameron Shaw, Alan Harris, Michelle Nickel, Natalie Chamberlain, Heather Apple, Jessica McFarland, Jim Watkins, and Gail Altman Miller. These donors span the whole country and are all dedicated to creating peace in the community, so I wanted to say a special thank you to all of them. You are welcome to join them again by going to oaklandpeacecenter.nationbuilder.com/donate. And now back to our regularly scheduled episode. Welcome to another episode of Hope from the Hood, the Peaceful City podcast, usually with your host, Sandhya Jha, director of the Oakland Peace Center. Today is a very special episode for us. A number of people have suggested I should get interviewed for the podcast so that people could learn a little bit more about me as the regular host and also learn a little bit more about the Oakland Peace Center, the organization that brings together so many of these amazing nonprofits and amazing individuals creating peace in the community. So I invited my very good friend Irene Flores, who has a background in radio journalism, to interview me for this week's episode. I hope you have as much fun with it as I did, and I would love to hear your thoughts and reflections on the Oakland Peace Center, possibly by visiting the Hope from the Hood Facebook page. We would love to get more of your feedback there. Thanks so much, and thanks so much to Irene Flores for not just her amazing interview skills, but her willingness to teach me a few things so that in the coming episodes of Hope from the Hood, you'll be hearing markedly better sound quality. She said the content was fantastic, and as soon as we get the sound quality up a little bit, we'll probably be reaching thousands of people. Sit back and be inspired by the work of our partners at the Oakland Peace Center, as narrated by me.
Topple Jericho stones with tones and poems and organized rings, how the karma get clean. Please forgive me cause I couldn't see clearly. Gotta get the block ready as the cops get heavy and your heart steady. Very heavy, it's up, listening to the ways of the world. Soon I'll be home again.
So this is Irene Flores, and I'm in Oakland with Sandhya Jha for the Hope from the Hood, the Peaceful City podcast. We're here together and we're going to talk about the Oakland Peace Center and some of the great work that they're doing.
I am delighted to be here. Thank you.
So Sandhya, let's talk about the Oakland Peace Center. Tell me in one line, what does the Oakland Peace Center do?
The Oakland Peace Center connects all of the peacemakers and peace builders in Oakland and the Bay Area to create peace built on access, opportunity, and dignity for all.
And how long have you been consolidated as the Oakland Peace Center? Tell me a little bit about the history there.
Yeah, so the Oakland Peace Center has existed since our inauguration on Martin Luther King weekend of 2011, so 3 years, and we're coming up on our third anniversary this upcoming MLK weekend. We were born out of a vision of First Christian Church of Oakland. It was a small congregation in a very, very large building with a dream of creating peace in the city that most of the members had grown up in, but they didn't have a lot of energy to do it themselves. They realized there were some really exceptional people doing that work of creating peace in a whole bunch of different ways all across the city. And they realized that what they had to offer the movement was 40,000 square feet of historic facility in a very beautiful and peaceful nook in the heart of Oakland.
This was before you joined the group.
I came to First Christian Church of Oakland in the spring of 2006, and we spent a couple of years trying to figure out how to build the congregation up so that it could fill all 40,000 square feet. When I got there were 10 members, and even at our largest, we just weren't using the building that we had been gifted with. So it was about 2009 that I started saying to the members of the congregation, what is it that you want to create? What is the legacy that you want to create? And they said that their dream was to create peace and tranquility in the midst of Oakland. And that was the moment that we started realizing we didn't actually have to do that by ourselves. We didn't have to create a church that was the solution to the problem of violence in Oakland. We could actually partner with the folks who were already doing that work.
So we are in 2014, year's about to end, and you are now, as the Oakland Peace Center, a group that's bringing together many organizations and hosting many organizations. Tell me about that.
So, like I said, the building is 40,000 square feet of historic property, and we've got 10 different nonprofits who actually have very low rent office space in the building, and we've got another 30 partners who are nonprofit organizations that believe in the mission of the Oakland Peace Center and host various events throughout the year. So we've hosted Kingian nonviolence trainings, and we've hosted the Children's Program for Black Organizing Project, and we've hosted a summer school for Mongolian children, and we've hosted community events on issues like gentrification and educating voters and getting civic participation in the voting process among poor people of color in Oakland. So we have events going on all throughout the year that our partners put on, again, at very, very low cost in a pretty remarkable building.
And I imagine you're getting a number of different languages and different cultures.
Absolutely. I think the most exciting thing about working at the Oakland Peace Center is I'm beginning to realize that the face of peace in Oakland and the Bay Area is as diverse as the population. And it's really exciting to get to work in that space and to interact with people from every possible community, and to realize that we have radically different ways of engaging in issues of peace and dignity, and at the same time we are all committed to that common cause together.
And out of the Oakland Peace Center work arose the podcast idea.
Mm-hmm.
And through the podcast, have you worked with organizations that are currently in the Oakland Peace Center? Tell me some of that.
Absolutely.
Across.
Yeah. I think honestly part of the purpose of the Hope from the Hood podcast for me was, after years and years and years of doing social justice work that was oriented around what is broken and what needs to be fixed, I personally needed to hear some stories of hope and inspiration. And I realized that on a day-to-day basis, the partners I work with at the Oakland Peace Center are creating that hope. And so the podcast was in some ways just about giving me the opportunity to be re-inspired around the work. And so the podcast has featured almost exclusively, although there have been a few exceptions to that, almost exclusively partners of the Oakland Peace Center, some of whom are what we call partners in residence, the ones who have office space there, and some of whom we refer to as partners at large, the partners who don't have office space in the building but are still part of the work of creating peace and understand themselves to be part of that collective.
Just before we started recording, I was asking you about the Oakland Peace Center and the work that you do, and you mentioned some of the physical work that you do as far as a space. And you also mentioned some of the work that you do in creating community and creating peace. And now there's this third dimension of media and the podcast. How are all of those coming together for you?
You know, I think the media aspect is just, there are so many inspiring stories out there. We tend to have this narrative of Oakland being a city saturated by violence, and I'm certainly not saying that's untrue, but we've got the solution to that problem in our midst. And I think that what is happening in Oakland around peace and justice work is so powerful that it offers the opportunity for people all across the country to learn from and be inspired by that work. So part of the purpose of Hope from the Hood, as far as the Oakland Peace Center goes, is simply sharing the stories, simply helping people know what amazing work is happening, and giving them the chance to plug into it rather than just be despondent about the narratives of hopelessness that tend to be a part of the dominant press and media. So that definitely happens every day. I had some of the members of the staff at Black Organizing Project drop in today to drop off lunch for the facilities coordinator and sat around and chatted about what's going on with their work and what's going on with ours, and that's really exciting.
Tell us about a particular experience where you felt like your organization was really accomplishing what it was set to do.
There was one moment recently where I invited a number of our partners to come and do me a personal favor. We're about to rehabilitate the building, and I wanted our local developing partner to know what it was that our partners needed. So each of them showed up individually, partly to support me and partly because they want the building to work better. And it was this magical moment of 10 of our partners who didn't know each other all that well started giving their little testimonies. And as they got off camera, somebody would go up to them and say, "Oh my gosh, you're doing that work? I've been wrestling with that exact same issue. How do I do such and such?" And one of the partners who does juicing as a way of addressing food justice in poor communities of color, he brought some juice with him, and all of a sudden the energy level in the room changed. And it was just the organic nature of all of these folks that I respect so deeply because they're on the front lines. They're in prisons, they're in jails, they're in poor schools, they're on the streets. And in that moment, in the very cold, very big sanctuary that desperately needs to be renovated, they were recognizing how they were all about the same work and how they really wanted to go deeper with each other in expanding that work together. In that moment, I realized, the Oakland Peace Center really isn't just a building that they need so that they can do their work independent of each other. The Oakland Peace Center really is the collective of all of us working together and learning how to support each other so that we can transform Oakland and the Bay Area into a place of peace.
And that's very similar to a question that you have sometimes on the podcast. So tell me about a moment that you had in your work with this organization that gave you hope.
I'm kind of spoiled when it comes to this question because the really fun thing about my work is I get to work with all of the folks who are doing amazing work in our community. The Hope from the Hood podcast is my chance to share with the rest of the world what is so great about my job. And really all I get to do is connect the people who are transforming our community with each other. I think a well-kept secret about a lot of the work that goes on around peace and justice in Oakland is a lot of the people doing the work are giving all of themselves to it, are doing it for usually very little pay, are usually doing it for, sometimes 20 hours a day, are often contributing their own funds to the work. They don't have the bandwidth to do anything other than the work that's in front of them because it is so pressing. And I think there's something of a gift in the moments that the Oakland Peace Center creates, where all of those folks who are giving everything they have to making the Bay Area a safe and vital place for all people, those moments where they actually get to connect with other people and realize they're not alone in the work, that alleviates some of the exhaustion, that alleviates some of the loneliness that we never talk about in the movement. I think every time our peace partners come together and start inspiring each other, I think that's a moment of hope for me.
And it sounds like the hope that you received in that instance is also very similar to what you're just constantly surrounding yourself with all of these organizations and interacting with them to see what their work is, what their progress is, what their goals are. What's been difficult?
We work with people from a lot of different cultures at the Oakland Peace Center, and that's something that 90% of the time I lift up as a great gift. But 10% of the time that's really challenging because most of the communities we work with are facing various forms of trauma, are facing various forms of oppression, and the ways that those traumas and oppressions intersect with each other actually lead to collisions occasionally. So in the midst of all of the uplifting, inspiring work that we do, there have been some moments where partners have really struggled with how they have felt treated by one another because of cultural differences, because of different understandings of what it means to be in partnership. And one of my big projects for 2015 is creating a values statement in partnership with the 40 partners at the Oakland Peace Center, so that we have some really explicit ground rules about what it means to actually be supporting each other and honoring each other's work and honoring each other's journeys. Because even though our goals are the same, even though our ultimate destination is the same, the places we're coming from and the experiences we've had are radically different. Sometimes our pain runs so deep that it is challenging for us to be able to hear and honor one another's pain. I think that's one of the big challenges at the Oakland Peace Center, but I also think that it's one of the only things that makes the work of the Oakland Peace Center an authentic model for what it means to work cross-culturally.
So now's a good time to ask you about your own cultural background. Is there something in your personal journey, your growing up, your cultural background, the values that shape you, that cause you to do this work?
So part of that for me is I grew up as one of only a handful of people of color in a predominantly white school in the suburbs of Akron, Ohio. I'm South Asian. My mother's from Scotland, my father's from India, but I identify primarily as South Asian. When I was in 4th grade, we started learning about Martin Luther King, and we learned that he had been heavily influenced by Mahatma Gandhi. So for the first time in my school experience, one of my people showed up in what I was learning about, and I gravitated immediately towards Dr. King and his teachings of nonviolence. The narrative of the civil rights movement was the closest thing at that point in my life that I could find to help me make sense of my own lived experience in America. Obviously, as I've gotten older, that's become more complex and more complicated, and I'm really grateful for the fact that I have a network of progressive Asian and South Asian activists who can help me navigate my own identity so I can stand with my own community and also be a better ally to other communities. But the other thing that I think drew me to the work of the Oakland Peace Center is when I was in seminary, I did an internship in South Central Los Angeles at All People's Community Center. And the work I was doing was primarily with formerly incarcerated gang members. And I remember driving some of them to a job interview one day, and they were kind of joking around with me about, oh, we bet that Shonda likes to date the bad guys, right? The bad boys. And I said in passing, because they didn't know this about me, I said, I actually dated a guy that I thought was a good guy until he shot somebody and ended up in jail. So I tend to go for the good boys who turn out to be bad boys. And the car went silent, and one of them said, why do you think that just because someone shot somebody, that makes them bad? I had already been through 3 years of seminary at that point in time, and it was such an indicting statement to me about the fact that all of these guys in the car with me were people I had come to love and value in my life. And I realized that the narratives of human dignity are much more complicated than I had been making them. And I think that's part of what drew me to the city of Oakland when I first started pastoring, and are also a large part of where the vision for the Oakland Peace Center came from, because I get to work with the good guys every day, no matter how complicated their histories are.
Tell me more about Oakland and your work in Oakland generally. We just talked about what in your background caused you to do this work. And it sounded like it was seeing the full spectrum of humanity and understanding the complexity. And now you're in Oakland.
There's this Celtic expression that says the distance between God and humanity is about 6 inches, and in the thin places it's even less. My experience of Oakland is that it's one of the thin places. There is something really dynamic and creative and vital, and I would say divine, about the people involved in the struggle for justice and dignity in Oakland. And that makes the work always worth doing, despite the fact that there are so many struggles that we face here. There's a tiny little spiritual community that a friend of mine started a few years ago called the Ubuntu community. It's an alternative spiritual community grounded in conscious hip-hop. The reason we use the word Ubuntu is it's a Swahili word that loosely translated means I am because you are, or I am because we are. And to me, that value is the underpinning of the Oakland Peace Center, and it's the underpinning of what can make Oakland a model for a peace-filled, just city for the rest of the world. And I think that's a large part of what drives me to do this work, is I get to participate in Ubuntu every day.
And as a nonprofit, the Oakland Peace Center, you were telling me about some of the day-to-day struggles of managing the organization, the paperwork, and things like this. Tell me about some of the goals that you have for next year.
A lot of the organizations that are a part of the Oakland Peace Center are one-person shops, somebody who had a really clear vision for how they could contribute to making Oakland a more vital place. So much of their time gets chewed up with fundraising and administrative work and figuring out how to file paperwork for their nonprofit status, and has very little to do with what they were called to do around ending violence, around creating access, opportunity, and dignity, around making sure that toddlers who are in immigration court get fair representation. Part of my dream for the Oakland Peace Center next year is that we can really resource those amazing partners in their work by finding ways to provide administrative and web support and social media support and fundraising support, so that the folks who are clearly called to do powerful work to transform our communities actually have the time to do that work. I think it's one of the most exciting possibilities for how the Oakland Peace Center can be supporting and resourcing our network.
And you are in a fundraising, or just about to start a fundraising campaign.
So we've existed for almost 3 years now, and we've been really committed to proving to the community that we are worth investing in by making sure that in every way possible we were providing a community space that helps with community transformation. So we were really committed to doing that without asking for any additional funds.
And that was providing a space and having events.
Yep. And intentionally creating opportunities for our partners to meet with each other so that they can build up the movement collaboratively instead of having to be siloed and isolated in the work that they're doing in the field. Now that we're established, we're aware of the fact that in order to take things to the next level, to be able to more fully support our partners so that they can do their work well and do it well together, we'd like to invite people to be a part of supporting those organizations by supporting the Oakland Peace Center. So we're inviting people to contribute to our very first fundraising campaign with, I think, a very humble goal of raising $25,000 by the end of the year. Some of that money will go to programming, so some of it will go to things like the community events that we provide at no charge. For example, our weekend-long MLK 3rd anniversary celebration, which will provide workshops on a huge array of peacemaking opportunities that range from ecological to anti-racism to inner peace work to opportunities for activism to food justice. Along with a panel on the new faces of the civil rights movement and a free concert for peace by a number of musicians in the community who want to give back. So part of the money will go to program, part of it will go to financially supporting my work. I've been working for free for the past 3 years because I believe so deeply in the cause. And now is a moment when I believe the Oakland Peace Center partners will be well served by having me around more frequently to help build up the resources we need to take the movement to the next level.
So now I have to ask, what does peace look like to you?
To me, peace looks like all of the people in this community getting to bring their greatest gifts and share them with each other because they are not burdened by the obligation to work 90 or 100 hours a week in order to provide housing for their family, that they're allowed to bring because they aren't burdened by fear of their neighbors or fear of the people who are supposed to serve and protect them. It looks like people being able to bring their greatest gifts because they know that those gifts are going to be valued no matter how different they are from others' gifts. And peace looks like every generation being able to honor what is unique and powerful about each other generation.
And what can we each do to foment peace?
There's been a statistic thrown around a lot in recent days about the fact that very few people have friends of races outside their own. And the one that's most commonly quoted is 75% of white people have no friends of, or no more than one friend of a different race. And although I think there are lots of systemic and political solutions to issues of inequity in our community and in our country, I'm not sure how far we're going to be able to legislate ourselves out of the systems of inequity until we actually get to know each other. Our facilities coordinator at the Oakland Peace Center today reminded me that we're in a unique position in Oakland. He said, I sometimes forget that in other parts of the country, people don't actually get to interact with each other, and here in Oakland, we have to. And he said, I think that makes our situation a lot different because we have to find solidarity with each other because we know each other as human beings and we care about each other. I think developing deep and substantive and trust-filled relationships across cultures is a very doable thing and an absolutely essential thing if we're ever going to create peace and justice in our communities. And that's it for another episode of Hope from the Hood, the Peaceful City podcast, with host Irene Flores and special guest Sandhya Jha, Director of the Oakland Peace Center. As always, if you'd like to learn more about the Oakland Peace Center, please visit www.oaklandpeacecenter.org. And also, if you would like to contribute to the work of the Oakland Peace Center, go to www.oaklandpeacecenter.nationbuilder.com/donate. Please give generously to the work of peace. In the meantime, until next week, may you find peace, and may you be peace, that all the world may know peace.